Welcome to This Is Whole Life, a podcast from the Whole Life Church in Orlando, Florida.
Join me, Ken Wetmore, lead pastor, and Melanie Bachman, our worship pastor, along with our communication team, Randy and Lucas. Take a look back, a look deeper, and a peek into the week ahead.
Here we explore meaningful conversations about spirituality, community, and living with purpose.
We don't have all the answers, but we are walking the journey together.
Wherever you're listening from, you're wanted here.
This is Whole Life.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 505 of This Is Whole Life. This is a special Friday edition for us, so hopefully you got the message early and we'll be tuning into your feed tonight.
Randy had a different voice earlier this week.
It's usually a little bit different.
It's just too much fun on staff retreat.
If you tuned in Tuesday night after the first day of fun, it was pretty hard to listen to be honest. It was an iPhone at my kitchen table with a little bit of squeaking here and there. It was about all I could
go ahead and use the iPhone as the excuse.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ken, for that.
I'm here for you.
It was the iPhone, guys. So that's my excuse.
There we go.
Thanks, Ken.
You're welcome.
So you know that every week we dig deeper into each message here at Whole Life. You know we're in greater things, looking to the past for the last 100 years. And the future of whole life. And as always, our conversation only lacks you. So whether you're on the front row or across the globe, 407-965-1607, voice or text or podcast at wholelife.church. We'll get you in touch. Let us know what you're thinking. So as always, to my right is lead pastor Ken Wetmore. Across the table, diagonally and directly, is Melanie Bachman, our worship pastor, and our special guest, which is to my left. You see how that works? A nice rotation. And we got to get the video podcast ready because I really want people to make sure they understand. I'm not joking. And who wants to do the invitation or the introduction?
We're okay. So I'm giving up. Putting it out there, huh?
Then you got to do it last time.
I got to do it last time. So
Melanie,
I get to introduce our special guest.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited to introduce our special guest. Sitting across from me is Jessica Brazier, who is Chief Inclusion Officer at Advent Health. And this past weekend, she was also our special guest speaker for kicking off our Black History Month celebration. So very excited to have you, Jessica.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you all for welcoming me with open arms over the past week. It's been a beautiful experience.
Well, you're very easy to welcome,
So after today, you're going to block all of our numbers, right? No more. That's enough. That's enough for a while.
Most time when you get a guest speaking invitation, it's one service. With us, it's two, and then it's also a podcast. It's not. It's a high level commitment coming to Whole
The
Life.
gift that keeps on giving, right?
Yes, it really is.
That is it. And it's true because this week, which we're going to get to in just a second, a bunch of you sent me text messages. A couple of you caught me in the hall and said, please tell me we are going to hear from Jessica on the podcast. Because they came in between services and they looked in the studio and they're like, there's nobody here. And I'm like, well, why would there be someone there if I'm not in there? But anyway, yeah. And so they were a little concerned, but don't be concerned because here we are. But before we do that, if you did not catch Jessica's message, please go right now, just pause, swipe up in today's show notes and hit the link for Speaking of Grace. That's our companion podcast. Episode 298 is Jessica's message. And you might want to listen to that before you listen to this because otherwise you're going to have no idea what she was talking about. So we're going to start with a text. Now, this is some house cleaning. Nashville Tim, I have to say, sent me an email about a week ago, about 2 paragraphs long, talking to me about Kalshi. And if you watched the Super Bowl, if you don't know what Kalshi is by now, I don't know what to do. But basically, you can bet on everything in the whole wide world. So he said that you can, based on the show's new theme song, and it was Kalshi said 99% chance it needed to be replaced. So, Jessica, we've been having a little discussion.
I went looking for that after I got a copy of that message, and I did not see that opportunity out there.
No?
I don't know for sure. I'm just gonna put out there that he might have been making it up.
I kind of felt like. Saying.
So I felt
poor Jessica's completely lost. She's like, do you do this every week? What is happening?
We are at episode 505. And when we got to 500, we changed the theme song for the 3rd time in the show's history.
And by we, He means
Randy.
Randy.
Randy did.
I made an
Without
executive decision.
consultation,
Executive decision.
So
Yes.
when we started this podcast with Andy and Jeff way back almost 10 years ago, it was
wow.
15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff. Well, when Andy left and Ken came, I said, do you want to still keep doing the podcast? Yeah, let's
He
do the
conveniently
podcast.
didn't keep the 15 part of it.
No. Well,
I didn't even realize that was an option until maybe just this moment.
yeah,
Randy.
well, I
really,
said,
because we've kind of moved well past 15.
yeah, we're already at 5, so that ain't going to happen.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, and it was like a 60 minutes. It was kind of like a little stopwatch. So very simple, very short. And then we went with, bigger, better, more musical. And that was the intro and the outro, a little bumper music when you tuned in. And so now it's like, I think it's getting old, a little long in the tooth. So let's do something a little jazzy, a little funky, a little.
Ooh.
So and Lucas did say he liked the one I chose the best. And my daughter.
So it's a 2-2 split, just so you know, Jessica.
Well,
this side of the table is less favorable toward it than the side you're
Wait,
on.
Randy, is this a democracy or is this a...
No.
Oh, no. It's,
But I will take your vote, though. If you have. Which will be hard
I think Jessica should be the tiebreaker.
Well, we have another one that, and I mentioned, I think it was last week on the show, that my daughter said, I like the new one. And it was poo-pooed from that side of the table that could have really been, there must have been some kind of, I think Ken's words were financial incentive or something to that.
And
tune.
technically, you're Lucas's
Boss?
so there could be some.
Lucas, where are you when I need you?
organizational conflict?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I got a text this week, and I can show it to anyone who'd like to see it. I would like to put
Is
it
this
on
one
record
from your wife?
that I said, wow. No, this is from Ellie
Throw
again.
Okay.
Okay.
And she said, I would like to put it on record that I said I liked the new podcast intro of my own opinion and free will.
Hilarious.
Is it
Signed Ellie.
notarized?
Boy, that sounds like Randy language to me. I'm just going to say it really sounds like.
Could be ChatGPT.
We
There is
believe you, Ellie.
there is a hyphen in there, so it could be ChatGPT. Okay. No,
Those
and-
M dashes will get you.
Yep. And so now here's the sealer. Text. Hi, Randy. I hope you're all having a great time at staff retreat. I'm excited for this week's podcast. I was really blessed by Jessica's sermon and the beautiful spoken word piece by Marjorie. I don't have any questions, just wanted to say how lovely this Black History Sabbath was. Also, as the podcast's number 2 listener, if anyone cares to challenge me, consider the gauntlet thrown. Oh, I
Ooh.
love you so much.
Wow.
Okay.
I really like, not a little bit like, maybe it's close. I really like the new podcast music and introduction. It's lively and exciting. Love you all and all that you do. Cecilia.
All right, Cecilia.
Okay.
All right.
Come on.
Can't argue with
All right.
Cecilia, I guess.
I guess it's done then.
Yep.
It's
Who's
finished.
you can't argue.
I want to
with
hear
that.
from Carolina Dave.
I know. I haven't. I did hear from him a couple weeks ago. Just a little private message that he sent me that I really hope he's doing well. So here's to you, Carolina Dave. Send an update, please. All right, here we go. Good morning, podcast team. This is an email. Thank you so much for taking time to answer my question this week. I was the one who asked, how do we get back to genuine connection with God? When God feels more distant, not because he's left, but because there's noise in our minds, how do we get back to real connection with God, to quieting ourselves enough to hear him again? The answer was to go back and do what I did when we first met God. And the truth is, I have been. I follow the same cadence of daily morning devotionals and reflection time, evening prayer walks. I've even invested a lot more recently in driving to the beach for sunrises or nighttime prayer walks. It may sound crazy, but I even drive to the Whole Life building and walk around at night to be closer to God because that's his house. But I inevitably end up running work scenarios through my mind, planning life, analyzing situation, asking AI questions that I should be asking God because sometimes I feel I get an actual answer back, all in my own strength. I catch myself and go back to praying, but to be honest, over the last few months, even though my effort has stayed consistent, my real connection has continued to grow distant. I miss God, and it's not for lack of trying. What am I missing? If you have any recommendations, I would really appreciate it. It's not something you need to take time on the next podcast to answer, but I'd really value some input. And if Pastor Ken has any thoughts, that would be especially meaningful. And if he's busy, And if he's busy, but any input would help. Thank you sincerely in advance, Jay. I know you said we didn't have to read it, Jay, but I also, my heart went out to you when I was reading that email when it came in this week. And, we've all been here, and I'm not sure that I have something that's grand, but it's one of those when you're in the mix, and then that's what I said, just keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you have an amazing routine that you're working through, and you're doing all the right things. And sometimes it's just that I don't hear you.
Well, I know that he specifically wants to hear from Ken, so I'll let Ken be the ultimate answer here. But I'll just put in my 2 cents worth before Ken puts in his dollar. Is that okay, Ken?
I imagine your 2 cents will equal out to my dollar. So just go for it.
Well, no, I think sometimes it's helpful to hear other people's personal experiences. And after our son was killed, I went through a period of time where it was, kind of like a spiritual adrenaline. You're coasting on spiritual adrenaline, and then darkness sets in. When that spiritual adrenaline wears off. And I remember many, many times praying and calling out to God. I remember being on my face on my living room floor, begging God to speak, to engage, to give me some indication of participation in the conversation I was trying to have. And there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. It was dead silence. And it kind of, I tried and tried and tried. And eventually I got to the point where I told God, listen, if you're not going to talk to me, then I'm not going to talk to you either. And so we just kind of had this a little bit of a stalemate for a while. And, but I think, and I don't honestly know exactly why that happens sometimes. I remember at some point through there reading in Deuteronomy where God tells the children of Israel something to the effect of, I made you hungry so that I could feed you. And I thought, well, is this you're making me hungry so that you can feed me? You're giving me silence so that I can listen harder, or so that when I really recognize, how much I need to hear your voice, that's when your voice is going to happen. But what I did in that whole time was, even though it was kind of a little bit of a standoff, I still wanted to be in the vicinity of God. I wanted to be around the things of God. So even though I was kind of rebelliously not engaging, I was still in the circle of the things of God. And eventually, I started hearing God again in the way that God communicates with me. Obviously, it's different for everybody, but it did take a long, long time. And so I just want to encourage you, in this time of, where it feels like you're in silence and God is not answering you. You're not alone. Other people have experienced the same thing, and I don't know why, but it doesn't mean the conversation's over.
Look at you, how rational. Like I don't even know how you're that rational when you're in that situation. I would just be like you were, like, guess what? Phone's hung up. I'm not going to be rational.
Well, I think if you had seen me on my living room floor crying and screaming at God, then you probably would not have called that very rational. But sure, let's call it rational in hindsight.
That was really beautiful, Melanie. I think that was a really great response. And one of the things that maybe I could add, Jay, is that life has seasons. Spiritual life has seasons. There's summer, there's fall, there's spring, and there's winter. And there are just times that things feel dead, like winter. And yet that winter time is important to be preparing for the spring. And so sometimes when I've been in my spiritual walk, I lived in Spokane for 5 years. And I remember one year where the newscaster came on I don't know if it was April or May, and said, after 234 days, I think we're finally going to get above 60 degrees. And just remember thinking, it's been winter. When is winter going to go away? Are we in Narnia, or what's going on? And sometimes, while that's funny, what's not funny is when you feel like you're stuck in a spiritual winter and you don't feel like it's ever going to lift, a little bit like what Melanie was talking. And I just would say, I think for most of us who have had a long-term relationship with Jesus, we've all been there. We've been all in that place where we feel like our prayers are hitting the ceiling and just dropping right back down on top of us, and where we don't feel the motivation to do the things that we used to just really feel the motivation to do and then feel fed by. And then when we do, then we don't feel fed. We walk away from it and we think, oh, did I do something to upset you, God? Is there something wrong with me? Is what's going on? And again, for me, one of the things maybe I could just encourage you with is sometimes it's just wintertime. And in wintertime, sometimes when the blizzard comes and things get snowed in, it's okay to kind of shut down the operations a little bit. I'm not saying that you quit praying or you quit studying your Bible or anything like that, but maybe it's okay to rest a little bit and to relax and trust that the God that brought in winter will bring in spring. And the other maybe perhaps a little bit of analogy too, and there's a couple different possibilities, and I just don't know well enough what you're in. And by the way, you're always welcome to call me up and talk about it if you'd like to. The other thing is that sometimes, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow in my sermon, but sometimes relationships change. We all kind of like that, that first falling in love experience, right? Like where like that great thing where everything's new and exciting and special. And sometimes when you have that kind of experience, you want it to stick around, but true love matures. It doesn't go necessarily away, but it changes the way it looks and the way that it feels. And I think that God gave us romantic relationships here on earth somewhat as a metaphor for the relationship that he has with us. And I think that one of the things that we can learn is that sometimes as we go into our relationship with God, that dopamine kick that we really started off with doesn't have the same kick 3 to 5 years in that it had. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a changing and growing kind of thing. I've been married for 27 years now, and I don't love Rochelle less, but the way I feel is different than when I first met her and had all those butterflies and all that sort of thing. I still get butterflies, but it's just different. It's a different kind of relationship.
It's not those cafeteria butterflies.
Yeah,
anymore,
right. So that's one of the things that I think in the world that we live in, we kind of want the instant gratification. We kind of are encouraged to have what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which is the Eros kind of love. That is maybe not the greatest of the loves. Maybe it's the kindling that gets the fire started, but it's not what keeps things going in the long term. We'll talk about that more tomorrow.
Well, goodness. That sounds a little spicy, Ken.
Well, it is Valentine's Day. But don't worry, you can bring your kids. I've deliberately kept it somewhere between G and PG.
I vetted it. We're good to go.
Do you think would you say that rating's fair between G and PG?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
No PG-13?
No, definitely
Nope.
not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
That's podcast next week.
Yeah. Well, we can bring that into the podcast, and then you can decide whether you want your kids listening to it on the ride.
It's not This Is Whole Life After Dark, people.
Oh, wow.
No, it's not. Stop it. All right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, and thank you, Jay, seriously, for just writing back in. I appreciate that.
And what I appreciate about that, by the way, is that you are not the only person listening to this podcast feeling this way right now. And you ask a question I think super valid, and a lot of people can identify with. And here's my encouragement to you: be a Jacob. Hang on to Jesus' feet until he blesses you. Don't let him go until he blesses you, and he will.
Good advice. Good advice. All right. So now, Jessica. First off, thank you for being here. We talked a little bit before we came on the show that it's we ask a lot around here 2 times on a Saturday, and then we may put you off until Tuesday or even Friday afternoon at 4:00 before we can finally get to it. So thank you for taking time out of your whole week to be a part of the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's already been worth it. I feel as though that question from Jay was planted because I needed a sermon from Melanie and Pastor Ken today. That was just profound. Thank you.
Well, there you go. It's even if this is, I'm not going to guarantee any editing times tonight, or if we just go fly really fast and just touch up a few things, and it's really hard for me to do as a perfectionist. But maybe we can try to get this out before Din. We'll see. I'm not promising.
That's a lot.
That's impressive.
Go hands go.
Although I'd be happy for you not to have to stay up late.
Well, me too. But also, there's a little bit of perfection we got to try to still get out of this guy. But it's a long journey yet. Anyway. I'm never sure what to think or what to prepare for when it comes to Black History Month, because you never know what perspective someone might have. You don't know what their background is, and you don't know what their theology is. Where are we going to go with this message? And I didn't have a great opening idea this week, except for the fact that I just kind of want to recap what I felt after you were done. And then maybe we can go at it from that. And tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong or if I'm way off somewhere in right field. But it felt like everything that you talked about had meaning for everyone. And I've never had a Black History Month sermon so seemingly directed that way. I felt like everything you could tell me about Black History Month, you could tell your mom, your brother, your sister, your family, or you could tell anyone in the room, and everyone's like, oh, there's a little piece for me. There's a little piece for me. Because sometimes it feels like it's for a big whole idea or a whole group, but not necessarily every person. And so I just left feeling like this was the best Black History Month message I've ever heard. For me to take something away from it that was really meaningful. And so, maybe, I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but that's kind of where I had to start from, because that felt real.
I really enjoyed the message. Really, 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 really enjoyed it a lot. I agree, Randy. I felt like it was a message that was hopeful, provided concrete things that we can think about and do. And also is just a reminder of the importance that Black Americans, important contributions that Black Americans have made and continue to make, and how our history is important for us to go back and think about. And because for very many reasons, it's important to go back and think about those things and not just be like, well, that's in the past. So,
right.
If I can just react to that. First of all, just the grace that you all are showing, but the way God is moving. Randy, I'm thinking about what you just shared. What you received from the sermon means so much, because I think it highlights the human experience. We are all connected in this network of mutuality, as Dr. King describes. A lot of people refer to it as the quilt. And I know sometimes when we hear Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month or the Asian American experience, you think, oh, that's for them. I'm not a part of that demographic, so I can tune out. But when we can all see how we can learn from each other's experiences, support each other through our realities, our individual realities, I think that's when we truly become brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's how God set this up. We are his children. And I loved, I think about when you just mentioned that, both you and Pastor Ken, Gail Murphy's song, I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. We are truly in this together. And I just appreciate so much that you left with that on your heart.
The thing that really started me kind of feeling that way was the way you described, and you went all the way through a little history, But right off the bat, when you asked, where are we in the long journey towards dignity, equality, and full belonging for Black people in America, you immediately went on to say, untreated systems don't heal. The danger is that we'll stop once the visible wounds start to heal, with the deeper injuries remaining untreated. And I'm like, who doesn't resonate with that from their own personal journey? No matter where you come from or what color your skin is or what country you come from, we've all had that. And I think there's the commonality that you were just talking about that makes us go, oh, well, okay. This is also part for me then as well. I can immediately join in. I love history. Carter G. Woodson had no idea that Black History Month celebration started as Negro History Week in 1926, 100 years with that. I was like, what are the chances?
What are the chances? And that whole life is also celebrating 100 years.
Yeah.
I love that parallelism.
A lot of great things started 100
years ago.
and I kind of want to chime in really quick that I thought that your opening illustration was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Grey's Anatomy episode, which I haven't watched Grey's Anatomy, so I'll have to take it from you that it's a great show. But
I'm disappointed that you and I have not watched.
Yeah,
because that would have meant probably more to us.
That's also surprising. Not even a single episode, because it's been on for like 20 seasons.
For sure. It's been. I know. I just, for whatever reason, I'm not maybe the most medical show.
I've been scolded for not watching. So.
But that said, I thought the story was really significant, and I thought it really made the point really, really well that so many times we think, oh, well, I don't see any blood. I don't see a gash. I don't see, you're not walking or you're not, swerving around the room. Everything must be okay for you. And we take care of what we can see, but sometimes there are internal injuries that will kill a person quicker than the ones that you can actually see externally. I'm reminded recently my son was rear-ended by somebody when he was at a standstill at a stoplight, and we took him to the emergency room, and they no cuts, no scrapes, no nothing. And they said, well, how are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm okay. And I said, okay. He says that he's been seeing double and he's feeling nauseous. And just like this, there was a ton of people that rushed him into a room. They sat him down. They took blood. It was kind of really overwhelming there for a minute, because what they recognized was just because they couldn't see anything didn't mean that he didn't have a brain bleed from a concussion or something like that, because he had hit his head on the steering wheel when he was rear-ended. Now, fortunately, he just had a pretty good concussion, and there was no bleeding. But what I appreciated about the Advent Health, thank you, Advent Health staff up at Winter Park, great emergency room, and great experience there. Really appreciated them. But what I appreciated is that they took it seriously. They didn't see anything, but they didn't say, oh, you know what, don't worry about it. We'll get around to you. We don't see anything. They recognized the possibilities, and they did something really quickly and took care of it. It made me feel good as a father. And to the analogy that you were making with your story, it's so important, I think, that we think, well, and that's the other part of it. Maybe we could even take it a little further, Jessica, is that just because you've had the laceration sewed up, just because you've had that happen, doesn't mean there isn't follow-up care that's going to happen, and doesn't mean there isn't trauma. If you've been, I think about burn victims, just because you have dealt with the life-threatening part of the burn doesn't mean that there isn't sometimes important reconstruction surgery that needs to take place to restore a person's feeling of self-worth and identity and how they look. And so I think that sometimes we think, well, we're not in the 1940s, or we're not in the Jim Crow era. We're not in the horrific period of American history where there was chattel slavery. We're not in that period, and let's just go ahead and move on. The wound's been sewed up. Things are better. And I think that sometimes we fail to recognize the scars that have been left that still need to be addressed, and that still cause pain and residual hurt through the years. I think about a similar thing that I observed. And again, one of the things I appreciate about Black History Month is that we have the opportunity, if we choose to take it up, to look through another person's eyes and hear what their experience is. And when people tell you their experience, I think it's important to believe them.
Right.
And I think that so many times what happens is we're like, oh, come on. And we, or we'll say that kind of thing is like, you're over dramatizing or whatever. Well, let's just stop for a minute. When we tell somebody something, we want to be taken seriously. We want people to believe us when we say this is our experience. We don't want to hear, oh, you're being dramatic or whatever. And I think it's really important for us to look through the lens that other people provide us and experience what they're seeing and say, oh, that's the experience you're having. Well, how does that impact the way I want to go ahead and react and be your neighbor and be your friend? I lived on Guam for 6 years, as I'm happy to tell everybody as often as I get a chance. And one of the life-changing things for me there was to be in another culture and look at life through a different lens. And I think that when you get outside of the cultural norms and lens that you grew up, you start seeing the world in a different way. And I think too often what happens is we get caught up in our own cultural lens, our own norms and everything like that. And we fail to say, you know what, there are other experiences in the world. And I can actually grow as a human being to be more Christ-like by seeing the world through a lot of different lenses. And so for me, that's one of the real values. It's one of the reasons why I think it's important to celebrate some of the different cultural opportunities that we have here, like Black History Month or Hispanic history and things like that. It's a chance for us to take a look at the world through a different lens and say, what can I learn and how can I be as a person? Do you feel like that's a fair thing, Jessica? Or, I mean,
Beautifully said. Should I have had Pastor Ken preach the sermon? Because I am really appreciating the additional layers. It's like it's like a piece of chocolate cake, 7-layer chocolate cake. You can just keep on getting layer after layer of meaning here. And I appreciate how you took the metaphor further to say, hey, even when the scar is healed, doesn't mean follow-up isn't necessary. And I'll even say for the invisible scars, if we can go back to that, Melanie mentioned grief earlier. And now that we're talking about this metaphor, I just remember a dear aunt of mine who lost her daughter, and she was feeling such deep, profound pain. And she said she would walk through the world, but nobody realized what she was going through. And she said she almost wished there could be a visible scar to show the world how much she was hurting, because she wanted to be handled with care. But think about everybody maybe walking with such real, it feels so palpable, but doesn't have a way to communicate what they're truly experiencing. But we see it on the back end. I remember talking with some of our physicians who were able to show that some of the chronic stress that some minority populations feel, it's measurable. You can see it in what's called the allostatic load. And it's very different. There's a disparity when you look at different populations just by day-to-day stresses of not being believed, not being respected, not being trusted, being feared. All of those things add up over time. And those are things that I think contribute to not just making this a metaphor, but a reality that so many people experience.
Were you here for the conference on mission where Terry Shaw, at that time the CEO of Advent Health, talked a little bit about, or not a lot about that particular
Absolutely.
thing?
Health equity. It was, that's what we refer to it as. So looking at, first of all, the goal is that everybody reaches their optimal health. And sometimes I know that, and I don't want to get too much into the work of what things mean, because I know that some of these terms can be controversial or misinterpreted. But what I like to refer to it as, we have a standard of care that we want to have for everyone. And when we see that some populations aren't experiencing the outcomes that they should or that we would expect as compared to others, that's our prompt to say we need to take action. And in many cases, you see wide disparities before even somebody comes into the point of care between especially populations of color and white populations. Not to say that disparities don't exist for white populations as well, but those are things that we have to look at and question why. We should at least ask the question why and try to diagnose, because things that are undiagnosed go untreated. And I think that's the deeper meaning of where this metaphor sought to go.
Well, don't we care about if we see someone suffering or hurting, we can blame and shame, or we can say, I care about you.
I care about you.
What can we do together to solve this? How can we work together to solve this? And that's the part that I think sometimes really bothers me, is when it's like, well, X, Y, Z, this is, it's their fault. Well, you know what? Let's say it were. When it's your kid, you don't care it's their fault. You say, let me help you. And sometimes, by the way, it's not their fault. It's absolutely not. But in a worst case scenario, if you're 100% right, don't you care about your neighbor? Don't you want to see them do better and flourish and grow and care enough for that? And that's the part that, if it's your child, if it's somebody you love, as a parent, I watch my kids make decisions that I'm not always super happy with. And I think that wasn't wise. And then there's a consequence. And then but my heart hurts when I see it. And there's helping that hurts sometimes. So you have to think through that too. But there's something wrong when there's not compassion in your heart for somebody who's suffering.
Wow.
I think. And that's what I think is problematic to me, when we don't have compassion at all, but we're just like, well, that's not my, I'll cross over to the other side of the road.
Right.
As your sermon talked about, instead of asking, and I thought that was such a beautifully stated, I think I've heard it before in literature, but I love that you brought it out, that going from thinking about what's best for me to thinking about what's best
for them.
What do they need from me? As opposed to, well, what's going to happen to me? And I think that's a shift that needs to happen across a lot of our society right now. I think that there's a lot of thinking about what's best for me as opposed to thinking about what's best for my neighbor.
Yeah.
I think we also live in an era of quick fixes. We want a pill for this. We want a solution for that. And when it comes to these kinds of deep generational woundings, that's not a quick fix. This is something we work through and work through and work through. And it doesn't matter, if you feel fatigue, think about how other people feel in terms of their fatigue that they carry with them every day. So the fatigue of being part of the solution, that comes with the costly love that you were talking about. I think even just looking back, yes, there are strides that have been made and, mile markers that we can say, yeah, that's fantastic. But, Ken, you mentioned Jim Crow. I think there are plenty of people that have said, hey, but we're in a new Jim Crow era. It doesn't look the same, but it's a different kind of framing for people who are continuing to experience these kinds of woundings. Not just personally, though, also systemically, because you can wound an entire community of people. And I think that it's difficult sometimes because for some of us, we can step into it and step out of it. We can participate for a little while and then we can go do something else. Costly love steps into it and stays in it.
Yes. Yes, and it's important, Melanie, as you spoke through that, I started thinking about the other thing, why we need to stay in it is because historical events don't just impact the people in the moment. They have generational repercussions. Yeah. Family structures to this day, 2026, family structures are still impacted by some of the systemic ways that chattel slavery was approached. If you look at the Caribbean, and one thing about chattel slavery, it was all throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. And while chattel slavery and the getting of new slaves in North America happened a lot by natural production, meaning they would have children who would become slaves. In the Caribbean, it was a lot of replacement by just bringing in more slaves, and they wanted men, and they would take men away from families and not women. And it just really disrupted what would be what we call a lot today, the nuclear family dynamic. And you just see that all throughout slavery, the dynamics of family and how people interact with each other, how they interact with children. To this day, many psychiatrists who study the impacts of generational wounds say that there's still very, very real elements that stemmed from the very beginning of slavery.
A while ago, I read a book called It Didn't Start With You. And in the book, they cite a study that was done that scientists did with mice, where they introduced the scent of cherries into these mice's cage, and then they electrocuted the mice.
Yes.
And what would happen is those mice would have babies who had never been electrocuted, and they would smell the cherry scent, and they would start freaking out, even though the babies hadn't been electrocuted. But because their parents had been, just the scent of cherry would make them upset. So the scientists thought, okay, maybe somehow mom or dad is communicating this, transmitting this to the baby mice and telling them the scent of cherry is dangerous, whatever. So what they did is they only electrocuted the males, and then they artificially inseminated female mice who had never been electrocuted, never met the male mice. They artificially inseminated them. And the fascinating thing was the babies that were born, when they introduced the scent of cherry, they freaked out for 3 generations.
Wow.
And I find that important because we have a tendency to say, well, it didn't happen to you. Well, but but DNA is a powerful thing. And the genes that get passed on, I think we don't know as much as we think we know about how trauma can be passed on from generation to generation without even a person knowing about it. I have several people in my family who have been adopted and didn't know their birth parents, and then would later on meet their birth parents well into adulthood and realized how much of their life was patterned along the way that birth parent had done it. And so I know there are people who will argue with the science I just talked about. I know that parts of it is controversial, but I think it's really worth thinking about, because when we tell people it didn't happen to you, or you've been raised, if it does, it's not helpful. And I'm, it's not helpful to say to the people in my family who have gone through adoption, oh, well, you're raised by a good family, so you have no reason to X, Y, or Z. That's not helpful. There is a part of their life, a part of their DNA that has created trauma for them that they've had to deal with, that isn't simply fixed by being in a good, loving family. It takes time and it takes help for that sort of thing. And compassion. And so those are some of the things that I would just love for people to kind of, I think we're very generous in giving ourselves reasons for why we do what we do. And we tend to be very stingy with others about why things are. And it's the, well, just get over it, or, and so for me, it's just one of those things to think about. And so often we politicize these issues and we make them about left politics or right politics or whatever, instead of just saying, let's talk about the humanity of this. Let's not make this political. Let's make it about humanity, and let's take the left and the right out of that. And I know it's a hard thing to do in the world we live in, but what would happen if we just looked at it as a human thing where we care about our neighbor?
Well, I think that goes back to what you said. And guys, there's so much. I mean, we've covered 3 things out of like 20 I wanted to talk about. And we're not going to get to everything. So you're going to have to go back and listen to the message because it was really good in our conversation. I wouldn't swap anything out for what we've talked about. But when Marjorie talked about in the piece that she wrote and narrated so beautifully prior to your message, which again, that is on Speaking of Grace. So just please swipe up and go check it out because you'll miss all what we're talking about here. But when she talked about, if you tell yourself long enough that I'm bad, that I'm not worthy, that I'm stupid, that whatever it is you put whatever you grew up listening to, right? Because we all have a soundtrack from someone or some people or other, in our life, just family members who said things that you replay in your mind and you have to deal with it. And of course, there's all the other external ones that come throughout your life that aren't nice or aren't helpful in any way, shape, or form. And then when you think about that and you think about what you were talking about is how this connection of how do you feel, how do you work through that? And Ken, when you were saying about the humanity, why can't we just look at the humanity and realize that when you told the story about being an 8-year-old little girl writing in your diary and not going back for a decade, maybe later, saying, I want to be good and I want to be beautiful. And that maybe those weren't my words.
It broke my heart hearing that because, you're such a beautiful person on the inside and out. And to hear that would be a real struggle for you hurts. It hurts that there would be things in our world that would create that in a little girl.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I should expound upon is I have beautiful parents
Sure, yeah.
who cared for me, who raised me in a home with love. I grew up in a community, especially a faith community that was supportive. And I think that further stresses the point that in spite of that, sometimes there's still external factors that we absorb and that affect our thinking about ourselves. And wow, truthfully, it has been a path and a journey. And I know this happens to so many young girls, which is why I can be honest about this now. Not just young girls, young people, period. A path toward understanding where I was not feeling whole so that I can really work on that and get to wholeness. And that's, I think, Pastor Ken, what you were just saying earlier is resonating a lot. A lot of times we try to move toward, oh, I shouldn't have to worry about that because I have all this good stuff in my life. Why am I focusing on the negative? It's not about putting on a victim mindset or focusing on the negative, but it's about achieving optimal wholeness. And sometimes that means looking at the experience in totality of who you are and what you feel. And that was a very present insecurity. And if I could take that even further, I remember going to high school. Again, I grew up in a sheltered environment, but in high school, I was dropped into a huge high school, public high school. And it was my first time going to a public school. It's really large. In fact, if I can give you a reference, my school in Decatur, Georgia, was the school that was featured in the movie called Drumline. Does that movie sound familiar? Do you remember that from back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
So it was our marching band about, my high school was bigger than my college. So just to give you context. And I was trying to see where I fit in. And I remember being amazed when these really lovely, popular girls, for some reason, they accepted me in their world, even though I was a little bit more religious, didn't go to games on Friday nights because of the Sabbath, didn't wear jewelry, didn't have their same vernacular, but they started welcoming into their world. And I started feeling a sense of belonging. Before that, though, I had started making a friend who, from day one, was kind to me. Maybe she wasn't conventionally beautiful in that high school way, but the other girls, the more popular girls, one day they started talking about her, not in a way that was uplifting. And they were laughing at her. And I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything at all. I still remember this, even though this girl had been so kind to me. And I just think in that moment, it shows how when you're not feeling secure yourself, you cannot truly acknowledge and protect the dignity of others. So I was feeling so excited about potentially being accepted somewhere else, even somewhere where maybe I didn't really belong, that I didn't preserve the dignity of somebody who had been so loving and kind and supportive to me from day one. And in retrospect, as I got older, I could see that. And I just wonder how often hurt people, and we talked about this in the sermon, hurt people.
Yeah.
Just because they're not recognizing their own dignity. And that's why I think it's so important to peel back those layers and to look within so that we don't unintentionally gloss over things that cause us to step over others.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
I like what you're talking about when you're talking about being whole, when you're talking about your own kind of journey to wholeness. And at Whole Life, we have just altered our mission statement a little bit of loving people into whole life with God. And that self-identity is part of that whole life. And I recognize that we have a really, culturally diverse congregation. And like you mentioned in your sermon, which I thought was a pretty profound observation, and that is sometimes love is very polite. And so I think my question is, how do we go, when we're talking about loving people into wholeness, how do we go from the polite kind of love that doesn't love someone into actual wholeness to the kind of love that actually does love people into wholeness who are experiencing this sort of fractured sense of self?
It's a great question. And I'm going to use an answer, and I hope it's not considered cheating, but from the sermon, because it's so true. And it's what I genuinely believe and what research even shows works, getting proximate. It can be easy to love someone from a distance, but have you been in their home? Have they been in your home? Do you know what's in their fridge? And getting close, do you know their mothers and fathers' names, their sisters and brothers, the realities they've dealt with? I think it's getting past the superficial to the real. And we all have been there. We all know what it's like to have layers of friends where some it's that light small talk and how are you? You can just say fine, and you try to say the glossy things. It almost feels like that social media friendship. But then there are those friends that can just look you in the eye and see something is wrong and who are willing to go there with you and get into the dirty with you and the ugly with you, who will sit with you when your parent is sick or when you're dealing with a loss or when something really bad happens, like you lose your job. Like, that is the kind of love we're talking about here, where you're close enough to even be there when it's ugly. And that's so much less than polite. A lot of times it's a kind of love that invites you even to be even more straightforward with truth telling, because that's what true love is. And so I want to see us get into that kind of costly love where it's something that you're almost sacrificing your comforts at times in order to be in it with somebody else.
I'm taking this out of context a little because everything built on itself like a good sermon should. So take this as what we're just talking about now. But to be in that proximity, wouldn't that require us to have what you called an unshakable sense that we matter? Like when you get to that point, what we've been talking about and what Marjorie was talking about early on in that about what we believe about ourselves. Loving, you talked about the rich young ruler, love for your God and love yourself as your neighbor. Who's my neighbor? What's my responsibility? But if we don't get to that point, how are we supposed to be in proximity to really care that we know who the non-superficial people are or things in their life are in order to get to that level where the only way they're going to reciprocate trust is that they see that that's in us?
You nailed it. It's actually when you don't feel that sense of dignity, it's actually this. It's somewhat ironic, I would say. When you don't feel a sense of dignity, a lot of times you're so anxious that you're always focused on self. Like, what is going to happen to me? There's almost a fear and anxiety of protecting and preserving self. When you feel the wholeness that God provides, when you feel that dignity, you can allow yourself to pour compassion into others. It's like, the analogy we always use, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
It's a little bit like that. It's filling yourself up so that you can effectively pour into and bless others.
And I was thinking, maybe it doesn't come, maybe that unshakable sense isn't every day. But there's times when you do feel it, and you do, with whatever is working for you at that time, you and God, and you're like, man, I do feel pretty good about, I feel good about me, feel kind of good about what's going on in my life. I feel like God's got some control, and I'm learning, and so I feel optimistic, and maybe I feel that. But there's other times when you don't, and I think that's where the reciprocation comes in, that you have to be at least that close, though, to have any idea that that's how I'm feeling, or that that's how you're feeling, or that you would actually want me to ask you a question and then listen, other than oh, I'm fine. Great. Thanks for asking. Right. And so I think that's the part that's the hardest to know. You might guess that someone might want or might need something, but how to broach that in a way that doesn't sound like all you want is the other.
It's because, and that's why proximity is so important. You don't want to just show up in the moment of crisis. Hopefully you've been pouring into that bank before, so that there's a little bit of trust built in, because that might make somebody suspicious. And that's why we talked about it as a daily practice. It's something that we're constantly and continuously doing, and that builds goodwill, that builds trust, and it happens over time. This is not an overnight solution, and that's why I'm really excited about the mission and vision that you all are stepping into with Greater Things, because I do think it is something that is going to take maturation to get to, and I think Whole Life is so well positioned for it.
Jessica, I have a question for you. We talked about this, and you're involved with an organization that facilitates conversations, difficult ones. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that organization? Do you have any tips for people who are saying, you know what, this stuff, I'm a little bit. I mean, I don't know if I really want to step into this realm. There's a lot of landmines, and if I say something, it's maybe misunderstood or misconstrued, or do you have any tips for people about that? Do you have anything you want to talk about with the organization that you work with that facilitates these kind of conversations?
Absolutely. I am part of a board of an organization called Crossing Party Lines. And so basically it's a group that brings diverse Americans together, meaning diverse in the biggest, broadest sense of the world, different generations, different geographies, different races and backgrounds, of course, political beliefs, together to have warm, civil dialogue about the hot topics of the day. And
is that possible?
It's possible. And that's the muscle we exercise. And we actually believe we get better at it when we practice it. And this is a group of people, or several groups of people, because there's several meetups around the nation, who come together intentionally to be provoked, if you will, to hear ideas that may not fit neatly into their box. But the only rule is, as you engage, you're doing so in a way that is civil, warm, engaging. Some of the key things that we teach and help our participants demonstrate is what it truly means to be an active listener. Not listening. I think a lot of us sometimes listen, trying to form our own answer to rebut, but to truly listen. And in the Judith Glasser, she wrote a great book called Conversational Intelligence. In the Judith Glasser sense, to step under the umbrella of somebody else's reality for just a moment, even to understand their point of view before going back into yours to share your point of view. And that might sound simple. And again, that's a metaphor, but it takes energy and work to truly do that. The other thing we talk about is a lot of times it's easy to say the political slogan, but what is your human experience? What has shaped the story behind what you believe? And we find that it's so much more genuine and authentic and easier to understand someone when they can speak from personal experience, their fears, their joys, what they want for their future, their desires. when they can speak from that place, it invites a different kind of conversation. And so those are just a couple, Pastor Ken and Pastor Melanie, that come to mind from the Crossing Party Lines group. But again, it's truly that muscle building, that practice of putting yourself out there. What I'll say is it's been shocking to see sometimes after one of our meetups, we've had cases where you'd have a conservative, a liberal, and a libertarian go out to eat afterwards to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
And that says a lot. And so those are things that we'd love to see more of, because in spite of seeing the world differently, we are all part of a collective human race, and our experiences affect each other. And so we want to be able to understand each other so that we can not just coexist better, but love each other better.
And sometimes differing viewpoints actually help each other. Like you're better off not on one extreme or on the other, but where we're able to talk it out and kind of come not necessarily to a middle ground, but to a place where like, okay, maybe this is a better idea. I know that on our staff at Whole Life, for me, it's really important that we have a lot of diversity, because one of the things I've discovered as a leader is that the more voices that are speaking into our plans and the ideas that we have, the better that the plans and ideas are at the end of the day. We just got done with this whole putting together our vision for the next 10 years. And part of that was recalibrating our mission and our vision and our values. And if I had done it all by myself, I'd like to think it would have been pretty good.
There's no doubt about it.
But 100% know that the product we came out with was 100 times better than what I would have done by myself with just my biases and the way that I think that things should be. And so, the literally thousands of hours that people invested into making this a better thing was better because we had a whole lot of different viewpoints. And there were times where there was very strong conversations about things, but in the end, it was respectful, and it was about the idea versus the character of the person. And so I think those are the helpful things. And, one of the things, Jessica, I've talked to you about is I'd be very interested in here at Whole Life trying to start some of these conversations with some of the tools that you're talking about, especially with somebody as skilled as you are at using them. Because one of the things I have definitely observed about you is you practice what you preach. You're a very good listener, and you're very empathetic and genuinely care about the people around you. So I'm hoping that we can, that this is not a one-off sermon, that we get to have some more Jessica Brazier and the Whole Life family conversation and helping us as we grow. Because you truly have so much to offer to this world. And for sure here at Whole Life, I can see there would be some things that would just be, because I think one of the things that people like me really struggle with is like, I just don't even know if I want to have a conversation, because I'm just afraid it's going to devolve into throwing mud at each other and tearing the church apart. And I don't want to see the church get torn apart. I know we need to have a conversation. I don't think we can have that conversation. It's just too controversial. And what I'm hearing you say is maybe not.
Maybe not. And you nailed it. We do believe better ideas, better solutions are at the center of bringing diverse thought together. Now, I will say this. It's not always easier. To your point, it could have been much easier. It probably would have taken you one night to come up with a vision all by yourself. It's not always the easier path.
Me and AI.
Exactly. And ChatGPT, I call her, I've named her Geppetta.
Oh, I like that.
Yes,
Okay.
I've named her Geppetta. But it's so much stronger when we come together and can battle test our ideas against other perspectives. And I will say, when you have complex problems to solve, especially problems that include people, oh, wow, it's so good to have the ideas of people, real people, to inform how you're thinking about solving those problems. And so Whole Life, you signed up to a very, very ambitious charge and calling. And I'm so excited to hear that you've brought a lot of good thinking, diverse thinking to set the strategy forth for how you do that.
Absolutely. It was a lot of hours, but it was good. I think we added a little bit, right, Melanie?
We added a little
bit,
teeny
just
tiny, just a little bit around the edges.
I mean, he could have done it without us for sure. All right. Lucas isn't here, so it's going to be questions with Randy, and we've got a couple of questions. First one is, are there practical ways to develop the sense of somebodyness if you don't have someone to speak that into you?
Mm.
And I know we've talked a little bit about that, but how do you do it? Or who do you get your information from other than Geppetta?
Oh,
That might be able to help speak a little bit of that somebodyness into you.
I want this to be a question for the group as well. I'd love to hear the different approaches that you all have observed in your personal experiences as well. I would say that doing the work of understanding who you are and where you shine, what energizes you, just really learning about yourself is a big step here. Now, if you're somebody who is struggling with somebodyness, I do want to say how important it is to not struggle with that alone. Where appropriate, and if you're open to this, therapy, connecting with your church team, make sure that you just share that with somebody, because it's something that can be difficult to struggle with alone. And so that's something I also want to reinforce.
Yeah.
I'll pause there because I want to make sure there's space for everyone to share any other ideas for building somebodyness or dignity.
Well, I think everybody's just really excited to hear you talk, Jessica.
They get to hear us speak a lot.
They do. They're probably tired of us. Somebody's pushing the fast forward button right now, waiting to get to the next thing you're going to say. I will say, though, that I think part of that process is also unlearning what people have told you are.
Ooh.
And who people have told you are. And the things that you have maybe even inadvertently taken on. There's a book, and I can't remember the title right now. I think it's by Myra Rivera, where she talks about the ways that we inscribe things on other people's flesh that are, this is who you are, and I'm inscribing this on you. And then those things kind of turn into prophecies and trajectories. But the process of erasing those things off of yourself and figuring out what's left without feeling the need to perform an identity for someone else.
Finding something in you that you believe in. It doesn't matter where you get to the point where I don't care if anyone doesn't like this part of me. This is me. I love this part of me. Maybe I need to rework it and, buff the edges a little bit, or just brush up on it, or whatever. But I think you have to come to a point where there's the part of you, there has to be something to build on. And and it always comes down to, for me, it's always been one thing or maybe two where you just look and go, man, I really like that about myself. I should find more situations where that's where I can use whatever I feel like I have, and to be the basis. And then, maybe that is, or it isn't for somebody else, but there's chances that at least you have something that you feel really good about yourself in.
Well said.
Cool. All right. One more. Question regarding our responsibility to our neighbor. How far do we go in our actions for neighbors? These texts might give us a clue. John 13:34 through 35 and 1 John 3:16 through 18. I think this begs the question, how far did Jesus take his responsibility toward us? In light of that, what's our responsibility to our neighbors?
Our responsibility. Oh.
No. That was you. That was me taking.
I love that we have a model in Jesus to guide how we look at and treat our neighbors. And he always went above and beyond. At least that's how I've interpreted him in the Bible. And the thing is, it wasn't just the neighbors who he was comfortable with. There were people who were part of his community, but he always stretched out to meet neighbors who people probably wouldn't even consider to be neighbors, people who were of different cultures, who had different backgrounds, who were in Samaria, talking to the woman at the well. So how far do we go? I would say pretty far, because we have an expanded definition of what being a neighbor is.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Can I follow up with that, Jessica, and ask you kind of a follow-up question? The world is a big place, and there's a lot of good that needs to be done. And sometimes I can feel a little overwhelmed at all the things that I feel like I have to respond to and speak up for, speak up against. There's a lot of people that have strong opinions on what the lead pastor of Whole Life should be saying and shouldn't be saying, and doing, not doing, and that sort of thing. The world is a big place. It feels smaller than it used to, but it's still, there's a lot of need. And so what would you tell somebody like me who's like, I feel exhausted. I feel exhausted by the need out there. And I don't feel like, I know that for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, but I feel pretty minimal compared to that. So what is my responsibility? Is it literally every little and big thing that's happening out there in the world, the starvation happening in all kinds of different parts of the world, the injustices that happen in all kinds of different places in the world? What is it all my responsibility? Do I have responsibility to do something about everything? How do I know what's in, if it's not, how do I know what's in my area?
Absolutely. As you began your question too, I have to recognize that sometimes this, and I'll call it for lack of a better word, this performative aspect of justice can be very exhausting, where we as everyday humans who are not experts or historians are asked to come up with bold, eloquent statements about any world issue. That is exhausting. It's exhausting even for people who do this full time for a living and who are experts in the areas where the injustices are happening. What I would encourage, and again, I want us to get the layers of the meaning of this advice, getting proximate. You might not know this by some of my nervousness with mics and my introversion, but in college, I actually studied journalism, and I really got to appreciate how news is done, especially local news. And I would remember a news director at a station I worked at would always say, there could be this big national story happening. What's your local angle? People don't want to know what's happening in California if you're in Alabama. They want to know, how is this affecting us here? And I would give us the same advice. How is our community responding? How are the people that we can touch and see? Where do they need care? How are they hurting? How can we show up for them? That makes it feel achievable. And that's where you can actually make a real profound difference. And the other thing I would share is God has blessed us each with individual gifts. Randy, I'm just so amazed by you as a podcaster and communicator. Maybe the way that you affect change is through this amazing gift that you've been given. We've got Pastor Ken and Pastor Melanie who pour into people all week long, and who also have a gift with words on Sabbath mornings where they're able to share their ministry with us. All of us have unique gifts. Some of it may be that person who has a gift of hospitality and so can welcome people into their home and feed them and cook. And all of us have gifts. And I would ask you to get familiar with your gifts, as well as getting familiar with your proximity or your local community, to see where you can affect change in meaningful, tangible ways. And that oftentimes, what I'll tell you, Pastor Ken, when you can lean in that way, it's so surprising. Sometimes it ends up filling your cup. When you're feeling empty, wow, it can be so amazing to know that somebody that you could reach out and touch was blessed by something that God has blessed you with, a gift that God has blessed you with, and that you've made a difference in their lives. And I hope that answer, there's so many layers to this, but I hope that answer at least gives us a start to how we might approach this overwhelming world we live in.
That's
That's
really
awesome.
helpful.
No, I think
Thank
that's
you.
great. And guys, just remember that anytime, if you're here local or if you're looking for ideas, send an email to Pastor Anderline, Anderline, at wholelife.church, or Justice at wholelife.church. You'll get that as well. And there are a ton of, over 100 partners that we work with here just in the Orlando area. We went and visited as a staff, iDignity, which I kind of thought I knew what they did. And then when you actually go and visit, you're like, whoa, I actually
Incredible.
would love to come and be a part of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they were like, look, we're not going to ask you to, lift the world when you come here. You're going to file some papers, you're going to do some things, but you're going to impact somebody's life by coming and helping. So even if that's just a first step, please do reach out. And I know that so often our listeners here do not get to hear the message because there's just not enough listens on that side of it. Now, some of you may have caught it live, but we can't leave until, and there's a ton that we miss. So please go listen to the message. But I want to leave us with what you said was the most dangerous thing isn't hatred, it's distance. So the question becomes, what kind of love will it take to fuel the next stretch of the journey? Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable, and I need everyone to stay with me. We've all crossed over to the other side of the road. Pain is not a competition. Comfort makes us complacent. One, remembering it's spiritual work, and two, the next stretch of the journey isn't from racism to harmony. It's from polite coexistence to costly love. And that kind of love requires going through and not around. This was speaking of Samaria and how they would go around to avoid the undesirables, or so they thought. And you finished with Black history is not just for Black people, just like the Exodus isn't just for Jews, just like the wilderness wasn't just for ancient Israel. God's story belongs to all of us. And that was just to me a really a nice stamp on the end of it to just leave with and say, God's story belongs to all of us. And the more we find ways to figure out how our journeys coincide with each other and coexist and co-journey, as it were, together. That's not a word, is it? Co-journey?
I think we should make it one.
Sure.
Sure, it is now. Fine. It is here anyway, so you can use it and you don't even have to give me credit. It's fine. It's totally fine.
A Randyism.
I'm the gift that keeps on giving, aren't I?
You are.
So once again, thank you. We do know that. I mean, we've gone long today. So guys, you wanted that Friday episode. You got it. And I hope you've enjoyed your time with Jessica as much as we have, whether last weekend and now here on Friday on the podcast. Thank you really so much for being a part.
Yeah, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you all for being this amazing, welcoming church. I've so loved every moment of being with you. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Ken. This is the Spicy Ken weekend.
Ooh.
Spicy Ken.
The greatest of these
Well, it's
was
Valentine's
Spicy
Day
Ken,
weekend. It's Valentine's Day weekend.
and it's the Eros love. Tell me where the word Eros comes from again, because you already went PG-13 earlier with the whole artificially, you know what, with the rats. So we're already PG-13. So tell me the rest, Ken.
Well, we won't be talking about that tomorrow, but
All right.
so we're talking about Eros. There are 4 Greek words that are used for love,
Okay.
Or 4 main ones that the Greeks use, because as I'm going to say tomorrow, you can love your wife, you can love your kids, you can love pizza, you can love your dog, you can love the place you live, you can love your brother or sister. And in English, we kind of understand that there's nuance to each one of those kinds of loves, that they're not exactly the same thing. Well, the Greeks took love and divvied it out into 4 different specific kinds of love. And Eros is one of those kind. Interestingly, it's never used in the Bible. It's not used in the New Testament at all. And so we're going to talk about whether that means that God's not in favor of this kind of love, or if there's maybe some nuance to it that we can pick up and learn from.
Bible's no rom-com.
Well, I mean, there's,
I think maybe it is.
Maybe?
there's some parts.
Well, there might be
Yeah.
a few parts. You're probably right. So you said you can love a dog?
My wife tells me so.
Well, we've talked about this for a long time, and as long as we're over time anyway, guys, I don't have my phone here. I'm going to show these guys in just a minute.
Oh, did you?
They got me.
Oh,
They
is
got
it
it.
at home now?
What?
Not yet. Next Thursday, we, if y'all remember, we went at Whole Life Church. We did Connected. The second year, we were down at a place called Interstruct.
Yep.
We used their parking lot.
Yeah.
And then Ellie and Heather did this Trash to Trends using garbage to build a dress. And they won the People's Choice Awards at the Orlando Trash to Trends. Well, Deborah was the person that helped them put that dress together in a collaboration with Common Sense, where Heather works, and Interstruct. Well, about, I think, 3 weeks ago, this puppy started showing up at Interstruct, and they kind of adopted it, but they don't really have a place for it. And so Petunia.
Ah, look at that.
Yeah.
Petunia.
Petunia McGray.
Is that
Is
your
that
name?
where we're going?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they want to. That's up to the girls. I mean, kind of figure the guy that walks it should be the one to name it. But I'll let I'm not going to pass judgment yet. They can make Dad the fool here, and that's fine. Please do. So yeah, Petunia is coming home next Thursday. The only thing we've been warned: she's not a jumper, she's not a licker, not a slobberer, but she's put a good shoe in front of her, and she will not stop until you can't find the pieces. So everyone's been warned. Shoes have to stay in places where Petunia can't get to them. So
Randy, you might have to get a new pair of shoes.
Wow.
Oh, don't.
What?
Now I see why he wanted the dog.
Yeah.
Because he
I
likes
choose up
the
my-
I
excuse
feel
to-
like you might have to do it more often than once a decade when you finally can't wear your most favorite ones anymore.
I'm known for wearing my shoes till there's holes into the soles through. I like what I like, and I don't like to get new shoes. Okay,
that's going to change.
This is probably going to change. Anyway, so I will. It's a good reason to join the Slack channel. You can meet Petunia later tonight.
Oh, fun.
In the Slack channel. So in today's show notes, swipe up here. There's a ton of links all to what we've been talking about with Amplify 2036. There'll be the link to Speaking of Grace and Jessica's message, and pictures of Petunia. So I only have 2.
Man, you really made it worth waiting until Friday.
Right?
Oh,
We
wow.
dumped a lot. And we got 4 weeks of love coming up.
Man.
And so, yeah.
Wow.
We survived the cold. I get my Harley back on Monday. Anything else you guys want to know?
Probably time to let people go, Randy. Probably time to let them go.
We're going to finish cabinets. Maybe I'll post pictures of the cabinets. Maybe I might get done
There
this
we
weekend.
go. Okay.
Melanie wants to see them.
Inquiring minds want to know.
That's it. Okay. All right, guys.
Such an exciting life.
Oh, it's a life. So, guys, thanks for listening and for your involvement as always, and have a fantastic week. Thanks for listening to This Is Whole Life. If today's conversation resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. To join the conversation, send a text or voicemail to 407-965-1607 or email podcast@wholelife.church. To learn more about Whole Life Church, worship with us online or in person, visit our website, wholelife.church. Until next time, this is Whole Life.